So this is basically my wrap up in TBR take 2. So I actually filmed this video a couple of days ago and I rewatched it because I wanted to edit it, and I watched it and I hated it. So we are going to redo this video. We're going to try it again and hopefully I end up liking it better this time. So this is my February wrap up and my March TBR, and there are quite a few books for my February wrap up that I have to get through. There are 10 books in all. I had a really great reading month, so I want to get through them really quickly and we will just jump right into them. The first book is one that I've talked about a couple of times on my channel, and that is The Bird and the Sword by Amy Harmon. And I've mentioned it a couple of times that I got this recommendation from the app Storygraph, and Storygraph actually gives some really great recommendations. I love using the recommendations tool, and in the month of January I read another recommendation that they gave. It wasn't the greatest. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, but this one I gave a 4 out of 5 stars and I liked so much better. So basically this is a YA fantasy, but I feel like it kind of teeters between YA and adult. It's in that sort of gray area, and I feel like if I give away too much of the plot, it's going to spoil it a little bit, so I'm gonna kind of keep it a little vague. The main character has gone through a lot of trauma in her life that has led her to become mute, and she also has these really strong powers, but in her world magic is basically outlawed. People who use magic are hunted, so she can't use her magic. And because she has these powers, she is kind of kept under lock and key. She is really heavily protected, but then one day she ends up getting stolen by this king, and it's kind of this almost enemies to lovers situation, maybe a rivals to lovers. They definitely have a lot of conflict, but I really liked watching their relationship grow. I liked watching them both grow as characters, and there are a lot of secrets between them. There are a lot of things that they have to find out, and I really enjoyed this book so much. Like I said, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I 100% recommend it. It's not a book that I'd ever heard of before. I think maybe I had heard of it once, but honestly it was very vague, don't remember it. So it was really exciting to get sort of like an unknown recommendation from Storygraph, and it was even more exciting that I ended up liking it. So the next book was another one that I really enjoyed, and that is Tiffany Sly Lives Here Now by Dana L. Davis, and I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. This one is a contemporary YA, and I just loved the way that it focused so much on family, friendship, and religion. This book follows the titular character Tiffany, and she has just lost her mother to cancer, and because of that she doesn't really have anyone to take care of her, but she does have these 2 prospective fathers. She doesn't know which one is her real father, and her mother never really disclosed it to her, so she ends up being sent off to one of the fathers who lives in Los Angeles, and she finds out that he has a family of his own and that he's also a Jehovah's Witness. So it's kind of like a huge culture shock when she moves over to Los Angeles and goes to live with her prospective father's family, and she has to kind of abide by their rules and abide by especially the religious rules. And it was definitely super interesting to get to read about the Jehovah's Witness religion in a YA book, because I feel like that's definitely not like a religious view that is well represented in YA. And regardless of anything, I really did like getting to read about it and getting to see how Tiffany sort of struggles with it and finds herself within this family. And like I said, I really enjoyed this book. However, it definitely focuses more on family, religion, and friendship instead of romance. So if you're looking for a romance, this is definitely not the book for you. But if you're looking for something that is kind of more about family, this would be perfect. And again, I read this as an audiobook and I loved the audiobook. The next book is I Want to Be Where You Are by Kristina Forrest, and I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. I was pretty in the middle of the road of this book. There were parts that I enjoyed, there were parts that I found super boring and forgettable. Overall, I did enjoy my reading experience of this book, and I did listen to it as an audiobook, and I totally recommend the audiobook. However, I just felt the story overall and the romance kind of fell flat for me. So basically, it's about the main character, and she wants to go to this ballet academy. However, her mom definitely doesn't want her to go. So instead of following her mom's rules, she goes behind her back and decides to go on a road trip all the way to DC in order to audition for this ballet academy. However, before she can go, one of her ex-friends finds out that she's going on this road trip, sees her packing up the car, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna blackmail you into letting me, you know, tag along on this road trip of yours, gonna bring my dog, and I need you to drop me off at the train station. And so that's kind of where the story starts, and it's a super interesting premise. I do really enjoy road trip stories. However, there's just something about the story that didn't really connect with me. I didn't really love the romance specifically, which I felt like was a big part of the story. To me, it felt like the main character, especially from like some of the anecdotes that she would tell us throughout the story, it seemed to me that she was kind of the person who would just kind of get a crush on anyone who was the closest to her in proximity. She has this one anecdote where she talks about how she had an inkling that one of her guy friends had a crush on her, so she immediately started having a crush on him randomly. And that kind of same thing seemed to be happening with her main love interest in like the present time. So didn't love the romance, didn't really feel very believable to me, but there were definitely some other parts of the story that I really enjoyed, and it's another one that I totally recommend if you're looking for a fluffy romantic contemporary. The next book is one that I read physically. That's so exciting. I feel like I read a lot of audiobooks in the month of February, and that is Grave Mercy by Robin Lafevers, and this is totally one of my new all-time favorite books. So this book is about a girl named Isme, and she is part of this convent, and they serve the god of death, Mortain. And at this convent there are a lot of other girls, and they learn the art of seduction and the art of murder. So already that premise was like, yes, I need it. And for so long, literally for years, almost 10 years probably, I have been wanting to read this book, and every time I saw it at the library I was like, ooh, I want to grab it, I want to get it, I want to read it. It looks like a book that I would love, but I always held myself back for some reason. Like, I would even see it at like the library book sale for like $2 or $3, and I still wouldn't get myself to buy it. And I was like, what's holding me back? Like, what am I not wanting to read about this book? Like, what is it? And I honestly don't know, because I finally read it and I was enthralled. It was everything to me. I loved it so much. There's a total like rivals to lovers aspect of this book. I wouldn't necessarily call it an enemies to lovers, because they are technically on the same side, but there is a lot of tension and conflict between the two of them, and I feel like it fits into the rivals to lovers sort of idea much better. But wow, this fantasy book was just, I don't know how it's not more popular, because I feel like this book has so many elements that book Twitter, book talk, booktube, they all love. And I'm just like, how have they not read this book? How am I not hearing about this book the same amount I'm hearing about like Throne of Glass or ACOTAR or whatever? Because I feel like this would totally go into that same sort of category. However, I think this is better written. So yeah, I think in April I am going to go ahead and finish the rest of the series, but I have other plans for my March TBR, so it'll definitely have to wait till April. The next book is another one that I really enjoyed, and that was Everybody Looking by Candice Iloh, and this was a novel in verse, which was super fun to read. I love reading novels in verse. Ever since I read The Poet X, like I think 2 years ago, I have loved reading novels in verse. I can't remember if The Poet X or Long Way Down was my first one now. I don't remember. Either way, they were both amazing, and I feel like every single novel in verse that I've read so far, I've just loved so much. And I gave this book a 4 to 5 stars. Basically, it's about this main character, and she is transitioning from high school to college. However, she comes from this very conservative background, and her father is kind of controlling. Her family in general is kind of controlling, and she is finally getting to experience life on her own. She's getting to experience independence, and she's getting to experience the world the way that she wants to experience it. Also, there's major trigger warnings for sexual assault. I should have probably said that a little bit earlier, but I just want to make that clear. Huge sexual assault trigger warnings. So basically, this book just deals a lot with family and independence, and finding yourself and culture and figuring out where you belong within your culture. And I just found this book to be so enriching. Also, the writing style was absolutely gorgeous. It totally sucks you into the story. But overall, I really enjoyed this book and I 100% recommend it. The next book is another one I have physically, and that is the Era Schizoduke by Harper St. George. And this is a historical romance. I loved it so much. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Oh my gosh, I can't even like tell you how much I love this book. I am desperate for the sequel. Like, I need the sequel immediately. There was so much build up to the sequel in this book and I'm ready for it. I need it right now. I know that it comes out sometime in July, I think, sometime in the summer. I want it. I really want it. Also, the cover is gorgeous. I'll put a little picture of it right here. Oh my gosh, the cover is just so beautiful. I thought this one was gorgeous, but the red in this cover, it's gorgeous. So basically, this book is about an American heiress named August, and her family is visiting England for the first time. Like I said, they have a lot of money, and there are definitely a lot of people in like the London society that want to kind of get into this family. And none more than Evan Sterling, the Duke of Rothschild. He has a title, but he is also totally broke, and he has a family to support. He has sisters, he has a mother. But like I said, he has no money. So that's where August's family comes in. While August isn't super interested in marrying anybody, she does have a younger sister who her family wants to pawn off onto the Duke of Rothschild. However, August is not hearing any of it. She does not want that for her sister, so she is going to fight this marriage as much as possible. However, the Duke of Rothschild, Evan, he has already met August and he already has set his sights on her instead of her sister. So he wants August, not the sister. So there's definitely a lot of conflict, and I loved it so much. Oh my gosh. It was a bit of like an enemies to lovers situation. As you can tell, I love that trope. Enemies to lovers, rivals to lovers, any of that kind of conflict. That's all for me. I love it. And this book just like made me fall in love with historical romance so much. I feel like it's always been a genre that I am definitely interested in, but I haven't read a lot from that genre, and I totally need to, because oh my gosh, this book was so good. I loved the romance, I loved the tension, I love the writing style, and I just love the way that the plot progressed. It was so good. Chef's kiss. Amazing. I feel like if it was a little bit longer, I would have given it a 5 stars. However, it was pretty short, so I was a little disappointed by that. But overall, it was a really fun read. I had such a good time, and the writing was gorgeous. And like I said, I cannot wait for the second book. I need it immediately. Okay, so on to my streak of 2-star books. The first one is Everything That Burns by Gita Trelease, or it's also called Liberté. So I was really anticipating this sequel. This is a sequel to Enchantée. I really liked that book. I think I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Totally one of my favorites of that year. However, once I got to Everything That Burns, it just completely fell flat for me. I felt like the plot was really meandering. It felt more like the plot was just consisting of a lot of side quests, nothing that was overarching. And then there was just like a lot of new characters that were introduced poorly, and I didn't really care about any of these new characters. I didn't really care about any of these new like conflicts that were brought up. And then also the romance definitely got shoved to the wayside. I did not like that. Like I said, I'm in a romance kick right now, and reading this book where I was really anticipating the romance, it was definitely a big letdown. So I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. I do not recommend going off to this book. And maybe in the grand scheme of things, since it is a duology, maybe I don't recommend the entire duology. I don't know. As much as I loved Enchantée, I feel like this second book just completely ruined it for me. Okay, so the next book is one that I went into knowing that it was a little controversial, and that is We Are Totally Normal by Rahul Kanakia, and I give this book a 2 out of 5 stars. So like I said, it's a little bit controversial. If you look at Goodreads, the average rating is a 2.71 out of 5 stars. So that's pretty bad. It's like one of the lowest ratings I've ever seen on a book that I intended to read. And I feel like the average rating is pretty well warranted, honestly. This book had so much potential to tell a really good, helpful, questioning story, but unfortunately it completely fell flat, and there were definitely some problematic elements in the book that were never truly addressed. So basically this is about the main character, and he is starting to question his sexuality. He's just broken up with his girlfriend, and while he still loves her and is super attracted to her, he is also becoming attracted to one of his male acquaintances. And like I said in my review, I said this like in the very beginning of my review, this book was just very off-putting, mainly because of the main character. He is just so self-centered and truly one of the most selfish main characters I've ever read. And I grew up reading The Clique and Gossip Girl, and this was like that times 2. It was in like an entirely different category. I have never seen a main character who is so self-centered and so selfish and so mean to the people that he cares about. Like, there are multiple passages in this book where he would look at one of his friends or even someone that he was like supposedly attracted to or cared about, and he would be genuinely disgusted by their presence, like actually like physically ill by their presence. And I'm like, that's your friend, that's someone that you claim to care about, and just because they're not useful to you in that specific moment, you're suddenly disgusted by their presence. And I was like, what? And this is something that never really gets resolved. Like, throughout the entire story, it's just basically about the main character using his best friends or even his acquaintances or the people that he's attracted to, or just like whoever is closest to him, and using them for his own gain, for his own especially social gain. He is very intent on social climbing. He is so obsessed with social status, and that never gets resolved. Like, there's never a point in the story where Nandan, he never really looks into himself and is like, why am I like this? What am I doing? Why am I using the people that I care about? Why am I only basing the worth of my friends on how much I can use them? So he never really changes as a character. There's no character growth, no development. It's really, really sad. Not to mention there's also a lot of biphobia and acephobia sprinkled in throughout this story. And the only reason I bring it up is because the homophobia in the story is 100% addressed. You know, whenever it's brought up, there's always someone to shoot it down or to say, oh, that's not okay or whatever. But whenever the biphobia or acephobia is written into the story, it's always supported. It's always, oh, it's fine. It's not a big deal. It's okay. And I'm just like, no, it's not. So I didn't love that. It ended up being a really messy, problematic questioning story, and I don't feel like it would help anybody who's questioning. Like, if I had read this when I was questioning back in like middle or high school, it would not have helped me. It would have been really harmful, and I'm like, I cannot imagine how it could be helpful to anybody. If it was to you, that's totally great. However, there's so many issues with it. It's just overwhelming. Okay, moving on to my last 2 stars of the month. That was Girl Serpentthorne by Melissa Bashardoust, and this one had a lot of potential as well. I was super excited to start this book. This one is marketed as sapphic. It's marketed as this like morally gray anti-hero character. I definitely had that idea, especially because of the tagline right here. It says, sometimes the princess is the monster. It gives you the idea that this is going to be a anti-hero, morally gray, possibly a villain origin story. It's none of those things. It's absolutely none of them. What really bothered me about this book, I don't even really want to talk about what it's about. It's basically Shatter Me, and I prefer Shatter Me over this book, clearly. I love Shatter Me by Tahada Mafi. Like, if you've never read it, go read it. It's amazing. I recommend it. So what really bothered me about this book, it's been so much time developing this relationship between Soraya and Azad, and it literally took up more than half of this book, about like developing the relationship, you know, creating the chemistry between them. And then suddenly, like that, you're just supposed to start shipping her with this girl that she's never really interacted with. They've interacted maybe like twice. It's never gone into any sort of depth. And suddenly, without any development, no, we don't need development, we're just going to start off this sapphic relationship. And if the author was going to do that, which is totally fine, she should have made the book probably twice as big. We needed more development. You can't just put a sapphic ship into a book and call it a day. That's fine, did my job, dust off my hands, we're all good. You got your sapphic ship. You don't need development. You don't need chemistry. No, 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 no. That is for other ships. Sapphic ships don't need any of that. They don't deserve development. They don't deserve chemistry. They don't deserve any of my actual attention. They just need to be plopped into a story and just, you should be happy. You should be grateful. And I'm like, actually, I deserve more from a sapphic ship. I deserve to see that chemistry. I deserve to see that development. If the author wanted Soraya to end up with this girl at the end, it should have been developed from the beginning. We shouldn't have even bothered with this other ship that like took up the majority of the book. And it's a short book. It's not like it's one of like these huge giant, you know, look at that. If it had been this size, totally fine. We would have gotten so much more development from this other sapphic ship. But when you have a book that's only about 300 pages, it's not long enough. You need to write more. You need to write more words. And I'm really tired of having to just accept these lackluster, poorly developed sapphic ships because I'm like desperate for sapphic representation. No, not gonna do that anymore. Not interested. I deserve better. All sapphics deserve better. Okay, so the very last book that I read for February is actually a reread, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this book because I've already read it. You've already heard me talk about it. I love it so much. It is historical fiction. It's set in the 70s, and it's about this rock band and this lead singer, I guess, or just like solo act, Daisy Jones, teaming up together with the band The Six, and they make beautiful magical music, and it's amazing. Also, this is probably being adapted into television, I think. I don't know if that's still happening, but I did just want to mention that. And oh my gosh, I love this book so much. I love it. I ended up listening to it as an audiobook this time around. As much as I like the audiobook, I do think that I prefer reading it physically because I get to listen to the album Girl by Maren Morris, and it fits so perfectly. Okay, so those are all the books that I read in February that took literally forever. So I have actually read 2 books in the month of March already. The first book that I read was The Other F Word, A Celebration of the Fat and Fierce, edited by Angie Manfredi. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this collection of essays, and there were definitely so many of them that I really enjoyed. I don't want to get into it too much though because I want to save it for my March wrap up. But oh my gosh, it was so amazing. I cried. Just wonderful book. The other book that I read was Bookish and the Beast by Ashley Poston, and I gave that a 4 out of 5 stars. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I really, really enjoyed it. Like I said, I'll talk about it more in my March wrap up. Okay, going on to my March TBR, I want to get to this really quickly. The first book of my March TBR is A Winter's Promise by Christelle Dabos. I am currently 147 pages into this book. This one's taking me a while to get through. I feel like I really want to savor it. So I don't know if I'm gonna finish it this month, but I'll definitely try to keep reading it. On to the bulk of my March TBR. So I have talked about this quite a few times on Twitter. I am going to be rereading the Throne of Glass series. Here we go. These are the first 2 books I'm starting off with, The Assassin's Blade and Throne of Glass. I've actually never read The Assassin's Blade. I've read 4 books in this series, and I did not start off with this like first like prequel book, and I probably should have. Like everybody I've talked to is like, yes, you have to read The Assassin's Blade. So we're starting off with The Assassin's Blade, and then we're gonna reread Throne of Glass. And as you can see, I have tabbed up this book before. Look at that, all those tabs. So I'm really excited to get to reread this book again. This will be the 3rd time that I've reread this book, and I think I'm really gonna have a lot of fun. I love that one of my notes in here is, here we are introduced to the legend herself, Nehemia. We love Nehemia in this household, so yeah. I'm so excited to reread this, especially with all the notes that I took in this copy. And then of course we move on to Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, my favorite, Queen of Shadows. I love this book so much. The next one is Empire of Storms, right? Is it Empire of Storms? And then it goes Tower of Dawn, right? Empire of Storms, Tower of Dawn, or is it the other way around? I don't know. We'll figure it out when we get there. And then of course the last book that I'm so excited to finally get to, Kingdom of Ash. Look it. Oh my gosh, so amazing. I remember when this book came out, I was really excited. However, I was like, I can't read it because I'm not even sure if I want to continue the series. So I ended up just watching like everybody's reading vlog where they talked about this book, and like all the spoilery vlogs, I watched them. I don't remember any of the spoilers, so hopefully I'm okay. But oh my gosh, I'm so excited to finally get to this book. I'm so excited. So yeah, just like a lot of Throne of Glass books. Oops, this one is backwards. So many of them. That's not even all of them. Here we go. Let's see if I can hold all of them at the same time. Oh my gosh. Ah, there they all are, out of order. So many books that I have to get through this month. Oh my gosh. Alright, so that concludes my February wrap-up and my March TBR. I think this one went so much better than the other one that I tried to film a couple of days ago. I love it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down below what you read in February and what you plan to read in March. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads. All the links are down below. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye!
Ooh, I thought it'd be me and you. Oh.